Knowing you're safe is not the same as feeling safe. And oftentimes there is a gap between your body's perception of safety and your mind's. Interoception can help you bridge that gap. So simply put, interoception is just the skill of paying attention to the sensations in your body, and it is a great way to lower anxiety. So just as an example, let's say that I am a nervous traveler. What can happen is that my mind is saying, like, there's no problem, you've been on a plane 1,000 times, but my body is holding anxiety. For me, that might mean a stomach ache. For you, that might mean feeling tension in your shoulders. There's all kinds of ways that our bodies internalize anxiety. But there's a perception gap. My mind is saying one thing, my body is saying the other. Of course, they are always interacting and affecting one another. So if my body's holding tension, it's going to start sending a message to my brain around a lack of safety. Then my mind, even though it started out feeling safe, or at least trying to talk me into it, starts to spin stories because I start to get a little bit dysregulated by that tension in the body. And so suddenly my mind is telling all kinds of stories around what could happen, none of which are based on any sort of fact. So we wind up in this anxiety spiral. And one of the ways we can break that spiral is to pay attention to the sensations in the body and kind of ask the mind to step aside for a moment. So when I pay attention to that feeling in my stomach, I can bring in breath, I can bring in some movement, I can do a gentle practice, more somatic oriented practice that helps to self-soothe, helps to soothe that tension. And then we get a clearer view of what's actually happening. Now, the other thing that happens when we practice interoception is we strengthen a part of the brain called the insula. The insula is sort of the bridge between the mind, the body, and the brain. It gets them talking to one another. And when we practice interoception, we strengthen the insula. The insula is also the part of the brain that governs empathy and self-agency. So when I simply notice the sensations in my hands, for example, I strengthen that part of my brain that governs empathy, which helps me to understand the anxiety I was feeling in the first place. And it helps me to feel more powerful. Self-agency means that I have power in my life and over my life. And that combination helps to strengthen that mind-body bridge, helps to strengthen the relationship between your mind and your body. So why can that feel so difficult? When we experience trauma or chronic stress, we tend to check out of the body because those experiences leave us feeling uncomfortable. Either we're in physical or emotional pain, and we don't want to feel that. It's totally reasonable. We don't want to feel physical or uncomfortable pain. But when we wind up in a habit of checking out of the body because there's this assumption that it's going to be painful, we lose this sense of agency. We lose this connection between the mind and the body. That checking out creates a pattern of not checking in. And when we don't check in, it's not only that we're not strengthening the insula and we're not strengthening empathy and self-agency, all of that, but we're also not really able to respond to the needs of the body. So simple things like needing to stretch because I've been in front of a computer for too long, or needing a snack because my blood sugar level is crashing. If I'm not checked into the body, I'm not noticing those things. And those are examples of things that then lead to more dysregulation and more of that kind of storytelling and anxiety that happens in the mind. But when we are more regularly paying attention to what's happening in the body, we can start to orient the mind to being in more service to the body. And then that builds a cooperation versus this conflict that oftentimes the mind and the body are in. So let me give you an example of a fun way you can practice this. Let's take a shape that your body moves into. Depending on whether you practice yoga or Pilates, you go for walks, whatever you do, sitting at your computer even is a shape that your body often moves into. And because you've been there probably 1,000 times, you have an idea, a mental idea of where you should be in that shape. But every day the body is having a different experience. So some days where you normally go is way too far, and some days it's not far enough. But you settle into this kind of mental habit of where you should be in that shape. And that is not actually supporting your body. It's sort of overriding what's actually happening in the body. So instead, you might consider coming into that shape and really dropping into the physical experience of the shape. So if I am coming into a warrior, for example, in yoga, I want to think about how much action my legs are taking, how low my hips are, where my shoulders are in space, all the sensations that are present, I can bring in a little bit more fully and respond to. So this is an excellent way to practice interoception. It's also a great way to move intuitively. So I sometimes kind of joke that I'm less a yoga teacher and more an intuitive movement teacher, because the shape that you're moving into should not be based on what I look like when I'm doing it. It should be based on your experience in your body. But when we're using visual cues, oftentimes we come into a shape from a mental experience or a cognitive experience versus a somatic experience. And again, this exploration can work with any shape. So if you'd like to practice this with me, give yourself a minute to get comfortable. Depending on where you are, you might do this practice in a seat and you might move around. I'll stay seated, but I'll give some prompts that help you to move around if that's where your body wants to go. So begin to make your way into stillness. And right away, notice how your body feels. Where you feel tension, where you feel achy, where you feel relaxed. And notice if there's any small movement or maybe breath that you could take that would allow some of that achiness or tension or discomfort to relax a little bit. So right away, you're dropping into awareness of where you don't feel great and where you could bring just a little bit of attention, a little bit of nourishment to that space. Could be as simple as directing your breath into that space and inviting it to relax. So often we're holding ourselves more tensely than we need to, right? Whether because of mental stress or body stress, we hold habitual tension in the body. So by noticing where we hold that tension, we are oftentimes able to relax some of that tension, because what we realize is that it's needless. We're over efforting out of habit, not because our body actually needs to be protected in that way. So give yourself 5 to 10 more breaths, just to see if you could release any tension, any muscular energy that is not needed in the shape that you're in. So you've let go of what you can. Now ask your body if there's any shape or movement or stretch you could move into that would help it feel even better. If that's not obvious to you, you could just move into a shape because it feels good or it feels interesting, something you're kind of curious about. Maybe it's a shape you've been in 100 times. Tree pose, just standing on 2 feet in mountain pose. It could just be a shape you want to choose because you want to see, what does it feel like to be here? You want to sink into it in a different way than you might normally. And if where you're most comfortable is a seat, you don't have to move. Wherever you are, start to notice the sensations. If you've been watching these videos, you know there's oftentimes a background track that's assessing. That can be there, but just try to orient your attention away from that background track that's assessing, and instead, just simply notice the sensations in your body in the shape you're in. And notice if those sensations are inviting you to shift in some way. If you're in a stretch, maybe they're inviting you to deepen the stretch. You're not feeling as much sensation as you'd like. Maybe you're feeling a little too much sensation and you're being invited to back out of the stretch a little bit. Or maybe there's some discomfort. And so your body's asking you for something a little different, to shift shapes a little bit. I'm going to invite you just to stay with this a little bit longer. If you are in a really active shape and you're starting to feel tired, respond to that. Again, every sensation is an opportunity to respond. And as we stay with this a bit longer, if you find yourself wanting to move into another shape and get curious about that shape, you can do that as well. Again, it's fine if you're just seated. You're consistently asking yourself, do I need more or less sensation? And you're attempting to ask that question of your body, not your mind. That question is based on how your body feels right this minute. And as you're exploring this, you're building trust. Your body is recognizing that you are responding to its needs. That builds trust between the mind and body so they can work in cooperation. And again, it strengthens the insula, which strengthens your ability to empathize with yourself, to understand what you're experiencing, as well as upping that feeling of self-agency, that we have power over our bodies and how we move them and how we carry them. If you're in an active pose, make your way into something more restful. And just take a moment to reflect, to notice the simplicity of what you noticed in a physical way about your body and about how you move it. But also to notice whether you feel more grounded. So another byproduct of interoception is it is very regulating. It calms the nervous system. When we are paying attention to the sensations in the body, it helps to regulate, ground, calm your nervous system. And because we're adding understanding, empathy, it also helps to up your self-compassion. So as always, we are spiraling through a number of the pillars all of the time. Today, we worked with interoception, which is a way of deep listening. We worked with nervous system regulation and with self-compassion. I'm Rachel. Subscribe for more somatic healing practices and nervous system regulation tools.